Hello, hello, hello. So, while I was asleep, Kuro actually managed to drop an Xbox reveal trailer. And at the very end of that Xbox reveal trailer for the game, we saw the ultimate animations of Denia and Hiyuki. You guys can kind of see that here.
Hmm.
And what's really interesting about these old animations is that they reveal a crap ton of information, especially for Denia, of course, right? They reveal tons of information that we want to break down. And one of the things that's really interesting about Denia in particular is that because you can kind of see here, she's revealed to be the Fernodian Resonator, because that's Aleph on the background, right? That gives us a lot of information as to what kind of role that Denia has within the overarching symbolic framework of the story. Because one of the things that we've been talking about excessively is that the whole world of Lahairoi is really based upon Norse mythology, right? Norse mythology and the myth of Ragnarok. And what's really interesting, of course, is that the Fernodian is Virunga, right? And Virunga is a name for Loki within Norse mythology. Specifically, it's a name that it's referring to the children of Loki. So, for example, with Fenrir, Fenrir has been mentioned as the son of Virunga, right? So we know that Virunga is Loki. And what's really interesting within the Hyrule story that we've kind of gone through with Norse mythology and Ragnarok is that Loki's children have parallels or analogs in game, right? Loki has three children. He has Jormungandr, the world serpent, and that has been basically kind of like paralleled with the void worm within the Hyrule. We also have Fenrir, the wolf, the rabid wolf that eats the sun, and that has been paralleled with the reactor husk that gets corrupted and tries to bring down the reactor drive within the Hyrule, right? And the only character, the only child of Loki that has not been explored yet is Hel, right? And Hel is Loki's only daughter. She's also the goddess of the underworld within Niflheim, right? And what's really interesting is that basically Denia, as the Fernodian resonator of Lahaira, you can kind of see it's pretty obvious that, that's Aleph 1 in the background, right? As a Fernodian resonator, Denia is so obviously the parallel of Hell, it's actually absurd, right? We've already talked about in the previous video how this whole idea of like the Katashiro, how she has like these paper cutting dolls that embody sin and human fear and negativity, right? And those are flying towards Aleph 1 as if it's sucking them up, as if it's kind of like consuming them for power. And the other thing that was rather interesting, as you guys can see here, is that within yesterday's drip marketing, we saw that, like Denia has a different form, right? And we talked about how when she's so inspired by Alice in Wonderland, like she's playing this game, like life is a game, right? She's within a game of chess and stuff like that. One thing that shows up prominently is her two forms, right? Denia has this sort of like almost villainous side to her, and then she also has a normal side, which we kind of saw is, like she has a gentle smile, one for all, and that is kind of like we referred to yesterday within the scope of Alice in Wonderland, that is basically the pawn and the queen, right? Alice is capable of being both a pawn and a queen within this game. And I think that that's basically been confirmed even further within this because she is a Fernodian resonator. Like she has two forms. She has this kind of side to herself, which is very interesting because it looks very regretful, right? Almost like she doesn't want to do this, that she has a form of like moral conscience, but at the same time, she's like shackled by duties. And that is something that Danny actually says within the 3.2 dialogue is that she's shackled, right? And beyond that, of course, like her alter ego, let's just say, is kind of like reaching a hand, is kind of like, embodying the embrace of the Fernodian. And this whole idea of dual forms is really interesting because as we talked about earlier, the goddess of death, Hel, right, does not have two forms. I guess you can't say that. It's more like she has two sides, right? Because Hel is oftentimes depicted as the goddess of death, with one side human and the other side a skeleton, right? And that, of course, embodies her sort of like liminal state, her being a bridge between life and death. And in addition to the fact that, of course, Denia is Hel, Hel as a figure within Norse mythology is also oftentimes depicted as being very omniscient, right? Like, not saying that she has like a literal crystal ball, but she's able to discern everything about truth and mortality because she has an all-seeing eye, right? So not only does she have a lot of kind of like connotations to Aleph 1 within her tacit mark here, but also like, the fact that she can see the lives of other people, like dead truth and mortality, is very reminiscent of the goddess of hell herself. The other thing, of course, is that one thing we kind of notice is that Denia seems almost reluctant, right? This dual side of her seems to kind of be in a little bit of a moral gray area. And that reflects Hel as well. Because even though Hel is the daughter of Loki, she isn't fully kind of on board with destroying the Lord. She isn't on board fully with the plan of Ragnarok. And what actually happens at the end of Ragnarok is that Hel is sort of like the harbor for the small amount of people that survive the end of the world. Again, Hel being kind of like having two forms, like being like two people, but also this idea that she's a bit of like a morally ambiguous character, right? She controls death, like she's not really guilty or evil because of that, seems to mirror Denia just even further, right? So very interesting correlation. And beyond that, of course, beyond all this reviews and stuff, we've actually known for quite a long time that, Denia being the Frenodian Resonator has been kind of like hinted at, of course, within the end of the 3.1 story, as well as also within, I think it was 2.4 within Mia's story, because within, I think it was 2.4, 2.6 within Mia's story, so the Doomed Gladiator within Lupa's story, because the lab that was trying to turn Mia into a resonator for the Frenodian was actually sending data to the highway. There's a lore entry that actually says that. So it seems like that, in conjunction with how all the Fraxis, kind of like the new Fraxis TDs, seem to have some kind of connotation that they have failed experiments, pushes for this idea that Denia may be like a real person, but she has been, maybe not actually, but she has been kind of manifested as, the Frenodian Resonator based on kind of like the Fraxis' experimentation, or at least possibly a conduit for the Frenodian LF1 to inject itself into the Hyroid, because one of the things we know is that LF1 has been trapped behind the Strider Gate, so they can't really exert their influence significantly, and it may be through like Denia as a vessel or a conduit that issue is rectified. So beyond that, of course, like we've kind of discussed already, how very obviously how she kind of controls a dark side, that was kind of revealed within the 3.2 segue story teaser, that it's most likely that Denia is going to be the one that controls the dark side, right? And her being Hel, the goddess of the underworld, parallels that immensely. Not just the fact that she is the daughter of Loki, quite literally, but also the fact that, like, she is quite regretful. She, like, controls this, like, world. She sees, like, the world through kind of like this eyeball, this sonora that she controls, right? Is very reminiscent of Hel as the goddess of the underworld. All in all, it seems like within the greater riddle of Ragnarok, one more piece has fallen into place. The final one of Loki's children, Aleph 1's children, has been revealed to be Denia herself. So if you enjoy this analysis, feel free to support me. But as always, I'll be kind of like posting or working on the new videos. That'll be something for April Fools. But besides that, I will see you guys in the next video.